more about that story now with transport analyst and Justice Fund CEO Lorenzo Davids. Lorenzo, a very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So should Santaco, should the taxi industry be held financially liable for the damages incurred during that 8-day stay away and the related violence?
Good evening, Tabitha, and to your viewers. The issue of liability and being responsible for what took place over the 8-day strike is a very, very complex matter. Now, straight out, should somebody who caused damage to property be held accountable? Yes, there's no doubt about that. And in this particular case, it is not as clear as what the mayor is saying in this case. For example, Santaco is an association of associations and owners. And when one association causes damage as a member of Santaco and another does not, where does the liability begin to be placed on the particular member association or member owner? Some owners kept their vehicles completely off the road and did not participate. Others participated in some of the activities that took place, the blockades and others. So this is a very, very complex issue, and it goes to the heart of the design and structure of Santaco, because it's not easy to lay blame or a particular financial liability or responsibility at Santaco's door. It's not that simple.
And there's always the argument whenever organizations, even with trade unions, when they lead strikes and there's damage or some level of destruction that's suffered in the cities, where they'll say, well, firstly, how do you prove that the people responsible for that were even part of our demonstration and not just criminal elements who took an opportunity because there was a crowd, there was disruption, and therefore they could easily get away with causing destruction?
Yeah, look, I've interviewed several people, and many of them said that as they engage, as the strike took place, and in fact, very real stories of people who work in similar sectors to me, said that when the strike took place, there were opportunists. There were other people that ran onto roads and into buildings and destroyed it. For example, invaded shopping malls, started lighting certain vehicles or stonings. Those are not necessarily members of Santaco, and the city would have a very, very, very difficult job to prove that the person who threw a stone on the R300 at a particular car or set a bus alight was actually a member of Santaco. This kind of culpable liability that tends to sort of lead this dialogue that because there's a group of people, Santaco must take responsibility for them is actually not going to stand up in any court of law, because the city will have to be very specific as to did the person who caused the damage, burnt the bus, threw the stone, damaged the car, was that at the instruction of Santaco? Was it as a member of Santaco? And was it in support of Santaco? So there's all these things that the city will have to prove to eventually, go to court with Santaco and say to them, you owe us 18 million rand for the damages caused. And again, I want to add to this, Timikile, is that violence in a strike is not acceptable. Burning of properties in a strike is not acceptable. And the entire issue of somebody taking responsibility for that and being prosecuted for that must be part of the entire strike ecosystem, the strike narrative in this country. We have a maturing labor relations union and space in this country. But when we begin to make these wild statements that somebody's going to be held accountable without being specific about that, you begin to rub good neighborliness up against each other. The city is now in a very, very deep context with Santaco where they are in 3 days of dialogue. This particular issue is going to disrupt that.
And I was going to ask you about that very issue, where this is going to leave efforts between the city and the taxi industry to work together, because even as the issue of the impounding of vehicles was gaining momentum and there was clearly dissatisfaction in the industry, the transport minister then jumped in and there was a battle between her and the city about whether or not the correct laws were being applied, and if so, where such law actually emanated from, right? Now we're in a situation where they say, well, we want to get this working because, as we know, taxis ferry the most people in this country. They do more than trains and buses are able to do daily. And if this is now going to be thrown into the mix, and as you're saying, this is going to potentially impact the discussions this week, it would ultimately be the commuters, right, who have to pay the price if this collapses.
Yeah. Absolutely. I am very scared that the mayor is introducing something that is now a contentious issue amidst and into the current dialogue that's happening there. I know the mayor stands for law and order, and I support law and order. I know that Santaco wants a better industry. I support Santaco in their quest for a better industry. The fact that they've come to this particular point where they are talking to each other should be hailed as a breakthrough, should be hailed as an achievement. It is now not the time to introduce a contentious issue that may break this particular unity that they are forging around better public transport. That's not saying this issue must not come onto the table, but how and where you launch this discussion is a very, very important issue in terms of negotiations as industry participants, as public transport participants. I mean, let's look at this carefully. Santaco, again, I say, is an association of associations. There's CARTA, there's CODETA, there's the Retreat Association, there's the CBD Association. Which association, which member association caused the damage? So the mayor will have to prove very, very particularly as to where the blame must be placed. To say generally at Santaco is simply not going to roll.
But with that in mind, then, Lorenzo, there should be some responsibility, should there not, on anyone who organizes a mass demonstration to take responsibility for the way in which those who are participating go about the industrial action or voicing their dissatisfaction, in this case through an association, against the city.
Absolutely. I said earlier that I hope the labor movement is maturing, and violence should not be part of any labor movement. We cannot continue to see violence, destruction of property, the burning of buildings and buses, all of those kinds of negative associations continue to be part of strikes. We should be able to have a peaceful strike that does no harm to property or to persons. The fact that 6 people died is simply unacceptable. Whoever did that must be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Whoever burned buses must be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. To glibly and sort of collectively lay the blame at Santaco's door, I think is at this stage not quite the statement that should be made when you are in delicate negotiations with the association to bring it closer to a integral part of the public transport network in terms of the city. So blaming an industry or a particular entity without the evidence that it is specifically that industry that caused it or that entity that caused it, that's problematic, and that's going to cause some concern in the negotiations that's happening now, tomorrow, in day 3.
Lorenzo Davids, good to speak to you, analyst, transport analyst, also a CEO of the Justice Fund, speaking to us on News at Prime.